much happy Pride to all. I am really glad to be speaking at this event, especially because this is not another event that just talks about queer rights this Pride Month, but it also talks about how to take things forward, how to make a more inclusive society and actually have queer persons have a seat at the table, have a voice of their own, and how do we take everything forward. Uh, I'm quite grateful to Mr. Bala and Mr. the previous speaker before me who have covered most of the ground about how queer activism, especially after the Navteej Johar judgment, which finally read down 377, things have drastically changed, not as is expected, but things have drastically changed, especially with respect to acceptance in the society. But speaking legally, although Supreme Court gave this really flowery judgment, it's like an apology letter to the queer community in the Navteej Singh Johar judgment that the society, the law has been extremely discriminatory towards the queer community. And it was just a simple law that made sex between two men and two women unnatural, quoted it unnatural, and made it an offense, a heinous offense for that matter. It was a very simple offense, so to say, these like 3 lines in the Indian Penal Code. However, it had a very, very strong impact on the queer community that impacted them from leading their lives how they wanted to, made their actual identity an offense. However, as soon as the section was read down from the penal code, the acceptance started to come in within the society, and at the same time, the institutions, the corporates started to change their policies because 377 uh, uh, being the section being there in the penal code still was a hurdle for the community to come out. But after the reading down, finally, the more progressive of the corporates and the institutions finally came up with queer policies within their internal workings. However, that being said, even today in 2024, we are not at a stage where there's a proper anti-discrimination law against the queer people. So today, legally speaking, we only have the reading down of 377 and a Transgender Persons Protection Act in place, which in itself is imperfect and a little problematic in many ways for the transgender community, right? But there is something in place for discrimination against transgender persons, but the same benefit does not extend to other queer identities. Now, if you are a person of a non-binary gender, which does not fall within the binary of man and a woman, your gender identity becomes a legal issue because you are required to disclose your gender identity in many forms, starting from your school admission to booking your train tickets, right? Well, till today, your IRCT still gives you an option to select your gender as transgender or, not to specify. But if you book flight tickets, the only two options you are given is a man and a woman. Now, as we know, airways is still largely, governed by the private sector, and Indigo and many other of these private corporates will have a huge UN show during the Pride Month about how they're inclusive, etc. But something as simple as providing, your gender identity while booking your flight ticket is not there. That shows that this UN show is just a huge pink washing and nothing else. Now, so 2023 was sort of a setback in the sense when we lost the marriage equality case. The judgment, since I was part of it, but I think, like legally also, it has many fallacies, and we have filed a review, but that will take its own course, like when it will be heard, when it will be overturned, etc. I think that will take a long time. But like trying to derive some silver lining out of it, uh, fighting for the marriage equality case has, brought the conversation on dinner tables in every households, right? So you can change laws, you can make laws, none of that will ever help uh, in changing the society directly, because if there is no acceptance within the straight households, I don't think the acceptance will be true in any way or form. So the most important thing that queer people deal with in this country, even after reading down of 377, is the recognition. Now, as a person of falling in the spectrum of sexual identity, you do not necessarily need to disclose that identity because it is not required as against person of gender non-binary. But that also holds you back from living your true life, because the way the world is developed and conditions, it's pretty homophobic, right? So having to always, pick and choose your words while talking about yourself, be it in school or in college or in your employment, so that don't accidentally tell that you belong to the queer community, also hinders in living your life as authentically as everyone should be living, right? Although it sounds a little uh, it does not sound that it's a legal problem, but I'll tell you how it becomes a legal problem. Say tomorrow you face discrimination at your workplace, and your workplace does not have an anti-discrimination policy. Now, every place of work which has more than 10 workers required to have a POSH committee legally. Now, that POSH committee is only for discrimination at, sexual harassment against women at the place of employment. If your internal policy of your corporate does not extend that benefit to queer people, you do not have any law protecting you from discrimination, right, at your workplace. You cannot go to a police station for filing a discrimination complaint because there is no law protecting you from discrimination. If you get beaten up, there, then the law will come in to protect you. But then also, the kind of hurdles one has to face before a police person by going and telling them there's your sexual identity and why you were targeted, why you were discriminated against. That is a whole thing in itself. But not having a law that protects your identity when the society is actively discriminatory, when the society is actively violent towards the queer community, it is problematic. The Transgender Protections Act defines certain offenses against the transgender persons, right? When you are discriminated against, when you face certain violence because of your gender identity, that becomes an offense under the Act. But the punishment under the Act for such an offense is only 2 years. But if you commit that act against any other person who does not belong to the community or who is not a transgender person, that punishment is much more higher in your penal code, right? So discriminations like this also, when you see in your daily lives, you recognize that not having a proper legal recognition, how it affects your daily life, and how not having a protection from law hinders living your more authentic life. It always, you have to, keep a watch over your shoulder that you do not accidentally give out your actual identity, that you don't accidentally, invite violence towards yourself.
Thank you so much for your wonderful insights, ma'am.
Another thing I wanted to actually point out was when we talk about awareness and when we talk about, changing, bringing in acceptance, changing society, None of that will happen unless we have the awareness program, the sensitization program within our education system. Now, the transgender welfare boards in every state, which it is required, and your Nafte Johar judgment, your Nalsa judgment, the Supreme Court, and your Transgender Protection Act, all of these provide that government stakeholders at every police station, at every government departments, you're required to sensitize the government worker, whoever comes in contact with person of, a different gender identity or sexual identity, to be properly sensitized towards the queer community. Now, this is something that you are required to do legally, which we all know does not happen. Secondly, your national education policy does not utter a single word about, well, sex education. Forget, educating people about the queer community. Kids at the age of 4 have an understanding of gender and sexual identity. That is the stage when, we should actually start to talk to our kids about both gender and sexual identities. But given the state of sex education in our country, we there's very less hope, although that is the first step one has to take. Secondly, proper and regular sensitization sessions in your government sector as well as your private sector is very, very important. That is something that has been made mandatory by the Honorable Supreme Court and is also required by a Transgender Protection Act, as in that's a legal, a statutory mandate as well. However, knowing the state of affairs, it's, you can make as many laws as you can. Supreme Court can pass as many judgments. None of that matters if, the executive does not take care of it, the executive does not implement those laws and policies.